Hello guys, and welcome back to HJW Gaming and my next commander guide, and by popular request we have done this on Legolas. Now Legolas in the 2.5 patch received a pretty substantial buff with a changing of his skills, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. So Legolas, in my opinion, has become a more prominent commander and definitely moved his way into the meta and is definitely more widely being used. So I thought I'd provide a commander guide on this that could benefit those who are looking into him and deciding whether or not to use him. If you find this guide fun or informative, please hit the like button, I'll definitely appreciate it. And also hit subscribe if you haven't already to see more of my commander guides or Rise to War content in the future. Now, Legolas. He is an elven commander who specialises particularly in dealing physical damage. So the stats we're going to be most focused on are going to be his damage and his attack, as this is what's going to determine how much damage those physical damage skills do. His damage range is actually pretty interesting. At tier 2 it is a 17 to 18 range, which means his damage is going to be pretty consistent, as that range is significantly smaller than a lot of other damage dealing commanders. For example, the Shadow has the same average damage coming in at 17.5, but his range is 16 to 19, so you will see a wider swing in his damage compared to Legolas, who obviously with that smaller range will therefore be more consistent, as I said. Once you ascend him, this does go up 5 to both the minimum and the max, so you can get him up to 22 to 23. Now this is still significantly lower than some of the other strongest physical damage dealing commanders, such as Dane or Beorn. Beorn, for example, having 24 to 26 base damage. So don't expect Legolas to do astronomical damage numbers without good gear to push this up further. The same story can be seen with Legolas's attack value. With a base value of 33, it only increases at 0.54 per level, which is significantly lower than most other damage dealers. Dane, for example, going up by 1 attack point per level, even tier 2s such as Lurtz and the Shadow going up by between 0.7 and 0.8 per level. So his attack is not going to be as high, which again means you're going to rely on your gear to get your attack up to a substantial level in order to deal enough damage. However, the one thing Legolas does benefit from compared to other damage dealers is a good initiative stat, with a base value of 31 increasing by 0.51 per level. Now, good initiative is actually more valuable than you think it would be for a damage dealing commander, as if you get your skills off before your opponent, of course towards the end of a battle there's a chance you could wipe out your opponent before they activate their skills, which means that therefore you'll take one less instance of damage, which of course can reduce the amount of troop loss, but also it's valuable because if you can outspeed some of the popular crowd control commanders such as Sauron, you potentially could get your high damage attacks off in advance of Sauron inflicting that kind of crowd control, or whichever commander it is inflicting that crowd control, which means that you could therefore get your high damage attacks off unhindered before the madness takes effect. So actually high initiative on a damage dealing commander is more valuable than you would think, and depending on your gear potentially could make up for that slightly lower attack and damage value. His other stats, of course, HP, command, etc., aren't really too relevant for him as a commander and are all fairly low as a result. Now for Legolas' skill build, you're going to want to build him like I have here. First up we have Greenleaf, which is a 1 round cooldown, so hits every second round in round 2, 4, 6, 8 and 10, deals 200% physical damage to 2 enemy formations. So basically every second round you're going to be dealing 400% damage, and with 5 skill points an additional 30% chance to deal additional poison damage once as well. On top of that, at 10 skill points, the target's next 1 instance of damage will be reduced by 20%. So basically you're dealing good amount of damage here on a regular basis, and you can also have the chance to reduce the damage being dealt by your opponent to yourself, but primarily here what we're looking for is just that increase in damage. So that's why we're taking Greenleaf first. Next up we have his Respect 2 skill, which is the Fair, and we're only putting 5 skill points into this first. So with 5 skill points in, this is 275% physical damage being dealt to one enemy formation, and that is a 2-round cooldown, so you're dealing that 275% physical damage every third round, so rounds 3, 6 and 9, and of course on round 6 that will line up exactly with some of the damage from Greenleaf, so you'll get a good burst of damage in there. And the reason we're taking this to 5 skill points is that the commander's formation will therefore gain initiative, meaning that in the next round he will deal his damage before anybody else, depending on if anyone else has initiative anyway, but he should deal his damage first, and that will be really important on those kind of odd number rounds, where in rounds 4 and 10 therefore Greenleaf skills will be hitting first due to that increased initiative. Whilst it's not incursion, that increased initiative should mean he attacks first, provided he is quick enough, which he should be. But that's why we're mainly taking that, is for that increased initiative and that reasonably decent damage burst. Of course, if you get him above Respect 10 Legolas and you get him to level 50, there will come a point where you can then start putting points back into the Fair. And at that point, you'll then be dealing 550% damage every 3 rounds. So you'll get a very good damage burst during those rounds. It's not as strong as, Durin's Bane on the Dwarves, but it's still a pretty hefty increase in damage. And when you do get to the point where you've maximised this skill, the commander's damage dealt to melee units also increases by 15%. So this gives you a good damage boost on your Legolas. But first, I'd recommend getting those 10 points in Greenleaf, 5 in the Fair, before then moving on to Dwarf Friend and putting all remaining points into Dwarf Friend until maximised. Then you can go back to putting points into the Fair. Now, Dwarf Friend is the skill that I mentioned about how Legolas had a pretty sizable buff. So if we look across to the patch notes for when 2.5 came in, Dwarf Friend changed pretty substantially. So previously it provided an attack boost to 3 allied formations, as well as a little bit of defense for dwarf and elf units. Overall, it was a pretty meh skill, and it really minimised Legolas's capability, as only having 2 damage skills will usually curb a commander's damage capability unless they have really high damage skills. You think about King of Men, for example, struggles in particular now with the increased number of skill points, as he only has 2 damage skills. I guess one of the exceptions to that is Lurtz, and that's because his 2 damage skills are very, very high damage, along with his high attack and damage stat. And his 3rd skill at least does increase his attack to boost his other 2 skills. But with this, it wouldn't have been enough to make Legolas good enough. But with the big buff that he's had is the change to Dwarf Friend, which changes it to another 3rd damage skill, which is great to see. So you're going to put any remaining skill points into here until maximised, and this is a similar skill to the Fair, at least in activation, in that it has a 2-round cooldown, so will activate in rounds 3, 6 and 9, and this will deal 300% physical damage to 2 enemy formations, so 600% damage every 3 rounds when you've got that 10 skill points allocated. On top of that, this skill also gains incursion once you have 5 skill points allocated, so this is guaranteed to activate first at the start of a round unless other enemies have incursion. So unlike the increase in initiative from the Fair, you actually get incursion from Dwarf Friend just for this skill alone. And once you've got 10 skill points in here, the damage received by allied formation units led by the commander with the highest attack is reduced by 10% for 1 round. So this actually is more beneficial than you would think, because it can help your very high attack commanders. You think like a Dane, for example, will have extremely low command but very high attack. This can help him take significantly reduced damage every 4th round, basically. So you can have a fairly big impact on reducing damage, but the main reason we're taking it is for that big 600% burst of damage every 3rd round, which of course, particularly in round 6, you're going to get synergy between Dwarf Friend, the Fair and Greenleaf, as you get all 3 activating in the same round and a massive burst of damage. So as I said, we're going to prioritise skill order. Greenleaf, 5 into the Fair, maximise Dwarf Friend, and then come back to increase the skill points in the Fair to get your maximum amount of damage possible for your respect level. The last skill is the Grey Elf, which isn't really worth mentioning too much, as it gives a small amount of evasion to elven units, but even when maximised it's only 20%, so it's not strong enough really in my opinion to make it worth investing in unless you have already taken Legolas to a very high respect level, but it's not worth taking over any of the other damage skills. Now, best in slot gear for Legolas. We're always going to go back to our trusty spreadsheet of physical damage dealers equipment. We've been through these a million times, so I'll run through them very quickly here now. Axe of Khazad-dûm is pretty much always the best for your damage dealers. So on Legolas, I'd always recommend that on him, as long as you can strengthen and refine it to a decent level. When fully refined, offers the highest amount of maximum damage at 30, highest average damage, and the highest attack boost. That attack boost and damage boost in particular are important for Legolas, as I said, as his baseline stats are a little bit lackluster. Black Bow is the secondary option for this, as it has the joint second highest average as well as the second highest average attack. And normally I'd recommend the Blazing Tongue as a very strong option, particularly for lower spend players, as you can get it from season end rewards. Though with Legolas, it's not quite as good as it can be for some of the other very high attack heroes. As with Legolas, the 27 attack boost isn't really enough. And the problem is with adding a weapon with this high of a damage range as well, of 10 to 30, when kind of his speciality, I suppose, with damage is having that small range, so he's quite consistent. You're kind of taking that away from him by adding a very high damage range weapon as well. So in my opinion, Blazing Tongue on Legolas is significantly worse than the other two, so I definitely recommend using one of those two if you can. But if you have no other option, or if you need a third option, then go with the Blazing Tongue. Of course, it depends on what gear you have strengthened and refined and available for use. For exquisite weaponry, I would only look really towards the Battle Axe. In Exquisite, highest amount of attack available and highest damage and average damage as well. All the others are a significant downgrade, so if you have to use Exquisite, I would use the Battle Axe definitely. Though it's a significant downgrade on the Flawless. I think a 1-star strengthened and refined Flawless piece will be better than this. So if you have any Flawless gear available, I would use that. But if you have to use Exquisite, Battle Axe is your choice. Now, Flawless chests. By and large, this is also applicable to Legolas. The 2.0 Raiment is an excellent choice and in my opinion the best in slot. Reason is it offers the highest amount of attack for a 2.0 piece of gear with 24, but it also offers +6 initiative, which really synergizes well with Legolas's high initiative already, along with that Respect 3 skill increasing his initiative. So you can really make sure that your Legolas is out in front of a lot of crowd control skills, getting very safe and consistent damage. The other benefit of using 2.0 gear, of course, is that you can use set effects. So I would recommend something like Perseverance for Legolas, so that you get that increasing amount of damage over time. In my opinion, something like Warcry is not as good, as of course that real high burst of damage comes in round 6. So if you haven't got Perseverance, I would probably say Might comes in second. And then after that, I would run something like a combination of Agility for that extra lean into initiative, potentially combined with something like Sharp Blade for that extra bonus attack, or a defensive set like Fortitude. But anyway, back into chest, there are two classic options if you have them available, which is the Durin's Plate and the Golden Skin, both of which can have the Fine effect, which can give massive attack boosts of 72 and 66 respectively. I'll dust over these as most people won't have these available, but of course with lower attack, these classic options become increasingly useful for Legolas, as with his low attack stat, this can really help to bolster that by offering very much the highest amount of attack available, and you can see the massive jump between 72 and 24 between the Durin's Plate and the 2.0 Raiment. So these classic pieces could be very useful. I don't recommend the High Elf Hauberk, as it's primarily for when you have very high attack stat, almost too high. You can then switch one of your pieces out for unit defense to make your commander a bit more tanky. But with Legolas' attack stat being a little bit low, I definitely recommend an attack increasing piece of gear. For exquisite chests, we're looking pretty much exactly the same. There's multiple classic pieces that increase attack very high, as you can see on screen, though the best of these is the Gallant Goblin Armour, which can give plus 54 attack when it's fully strengthened and refined. Of course, this is still a massive jump up on the Berserker's Raiment that we saw on the previous page, so still a very strong attack increase. though of course not a lot of people have classic gear available. And of course you don't get set effects from this, so if you're looking for a 2.0 piece of exquisite gear and you're forced to use exquisite, then I would run the scale mail, as it offers the highest amount of attack at 15. For helms, 2.0 I would go with the Cask of Pride. Highest attack increase, highest HP increase. What more could you want? Plus 48 attack on a hero that has slightly lackluster attack is enormous, and so very, very useful, and the highest that you increase that you can get on him from the helm slot. There is the classic Cask of Pride as well, which can make him a little bit more tanky with unit defense, though this is not as good as the 2.0 version on Legolas, so I would definitely use the 2.0 if you can. But another great option is also the Cask of the Submerged Isle Classic with Determination. Gives a high attack boost of plus 30, so a little bit less than you get from the 2.0 Cask of Pride. But with Determination well refined, you can give Madness immunity to Legolas to prevent completely that he will get that madness from crowd control skills. Of course, with high initiative, you might get out in front of them and not need this, but it could still impact you and hit after those skills, and then you'll have madness in the following rounds. So whilst you will have reduced the amount of kind of impact that you take, you could still get hit for further rounds. So you could just further negate that completely by running a Determination helm if you have it available. Most people won't, so use the 2.0 Cask of Pride. Exquisite helms see similar trends to the chest in that actually classic helms in exquisite rarity are significantly ahead of their 2.0 counterparts. In this case, the classic melee vigor full helm offering 45 bonus attack, which is enormous. Almost as much, of course, as that 2.0 flawless rarity Cask of Pride. So if you have this available, this could be a very cheap option into getting high attack on Legolas. But if you're looking towards 2.0 gear, use the 2.0 full helm, which offers the highest amount for 2.0 exquisite gear at 18 attack. And lastly, for accessory, there's two 2.0 accessories that offer increased attack as well as increased damage, and these are the Palantir and the Drums of Barad-dûr. Whichever one you can refine the highest is the one I would use, though the Palantir of course is best in slot as it offers more attack and has that smaller damage range of 10 to 10 guaranteed when fully refined, 5 to 5 at base level, whereas the Drums of Barad-dûr does have a split. So actually the Palantir again leans well into Legolas as it keeps that damage range nice, low and tight, so you'll get consistent damage output from him across multiple of your fights. Exquisite rarity, not worth mentioning, as unfortunately there are none that do damage increase. If you have to use exquisite and you just want bonus attack, then the Bone Talisman's the best, but this is a massive downgrade on flawless, and even unupgraded flawless is better. Now into Legolas's Relic, and this is another one of those things that really helps push Legolas above and beyond, and that's the Bow of the Galadrim. Base stats, this is worth picking up as it offers bonus commander attack, which is the main thing you'd look for it, just to help again increase that attack and increase his commander damage. But the main useful thing on it is the Mirkwood dexterity effect, very similar to the effect on Lurtz's bow and his relic. It increases the additional amount of damage that you can get from your normal attacks to up to 125% when fully refined. So this is a lovely damage boost to an already fairly high damage commander through his skills. So I definitely recommend picking this up and refining it as high as possible. And lastly, Legolas's Zenith outfit I actually think is a pretty good one, as it does change his skin fairly substantially. Of course, we've seen others like Lurtz that don't really change their skin at all other than make them a bit pale, but I actually think Legolas takes him from this kind of Mirkwood view into more of an Elven Prince, and I actually think he comes out as one of the better Zenith skins. So if you've got him, why not pick this up? I think it's a pretty nice look for him. Now, into a couple of battle reports. First up, credit to the Gore Commander server, which does give good advice on pretty much every commander in the game, and is where I've got a lot of my information, as well as some of these reports as well. So if you're looking for advice on commanders, look no further. Link is in the description. Please check out their Discord guide. Definitely worth a shout out every opportunity I can get, and if anyone's looking for the information, it's probably the best place to go. Very, very large and very active community as well, so if you have any questions, please just ask in one of the forums and people will definitely get back to you. Anyway, into reports for Legolas. As you can see here, he's capable of massive outputs of damage, very high damage, similar to that of some of the best in the business. Maybe a little bit less than you'll get from the real tip top, like a Dane or a Bayorn, but definitely capable of very high outputs of damage. Additionally, because he has that enormous number of damage instances between 3 different damage skills, one of which activates every second round, as well as his normal attack dealing an extra instance of physical damage, he can be a reasonably effective White Council clearer. In my opinion, not as good as, say, Bayorn with his bleed effect, or Shadow with his multiple normal attacks, but still a very strong White Council clearer, with additional bonus damage from all those skills as well. So he kind of sits halfway in between that pure damage and White Council clearer, and can be very effective in both areas. In my opinion, he sits somewhere around the probably an A tier commander. I think he sits above commanders such as Lurtz, and on a similar par to maybe the Shadow, maybe slightly below the Shadow. But he is a very, very strong commander in the meta. If you are considering investing in Legolas, I don't think it's a bad decision, particularly if you're in a roleplay server looking for a tier 2. I think I would definitely look towards Legolas. Of course, with tier 2 good side, you have both Legolas and Gimli, who in my opinion I would put on similar footing. The one thing that Legolas lacks compared to Gimli at higher respect, of course, is the keen eye effect that Gimli can get on his relic, which allows you to hit through evasion, with Gil-galad becoming somewhat more prominent in the meta. So Gimli Legolas, I think Legolas is capable of slightly more damage, whilst Gimli does benefit, of course, through that evasion, so you'll get less variance in your reports against Gil-galads. But I definitely think Legolas is A tier without doubt in my mind. So I definitely have him as a recommended commander if you are looking for a tier 2. Anyway, hopefully you guys have found this guide useful. If you have, as I said earlier, please hammer the like button. I'll really, really appreciate that. And if you could hit subscribe to see more of my guides in future. And with that, I really hope to see you on the next one.